Subscribe, like, comment and share to support the channel. Thank you for the support. We return to Ahun's house on top of the tree during the harsh stormy weather. His little sister, one of our baby angels, is seen breathing heavily as she battled against the evil of the disease called Red Death. Ahun along with Vikir and Ayan stood by her side and monitored her status. Vikir then questions Ahun about when she had first showed signs of the Red Death. Ahun tells him since yesterday. He suspected that she had entered the swamp when they were gathering the wood for the construction of their houses on the trees. Ayan cuts in to inform Vikir that Ahul, the name of Ahun's little sister, was a kind child who always helps people. She wonders if there was anything Vikir could do. Even Ahun looked at him with a worried expression on his face. "Ha!" shouted someone as the voice grabs everyone's attention in the house. A wet foot appears. The shaman had appeared in the house as well, with an annoyed look on his face. He tells them that it serves Ahul right for going around and not listening to her grandpa. He continues to scold Ahul, telling them that what goes around comes around, and that this is what happens when you listen to the words of that imperial spy bastard Vikir. Ahun stands up in front of his grandfather to tell him that his words were too much. "Shut up!" shouted the shaman as a loud slap sound resonated throughout the house. He calls Ahun a useless bastard. As he was the same as his parents, Ahun could not talk back to the shaman as he held his cheek which had gotten slapped by him. The shaman then opens his umbrella as he exits from the house. Turning back to the group once again, he tells them that he had mentioned this repeatedly, that this disease was a curse from God and that the answer to it was to carry out an ancestral rite. The shaman then warns them to not dirty the Balak's name by succumbing to the imperialist Vikir. Since things have come to this, the shaman was confident that the matriarch will surely permit it. Ayan and Ahun could not refute the shaman's claims as he walked away from them. Ayan could only scold him under her breath while Ahun stood silently even after being hit and insulted. He then started to cry over the fact that he was a useless older brother that could do nothing to save his own little sister, but Vikir spoke out to them, telling them that if they were referring to treatment, he knew of one such method. He then orders Ahun to sanitize the furniture that Ahul uses with boiling water, then to burn charcoal in the bonfire to chase out all of the bugs and bats that are around the house. They also needed to create an environment for Ahul to combat the disease in order for them to buy some time. "Can you do that?" asked Vikir to Ahun as he looked at Vikir with tears in his eyes. He quickly rubs the tears away, telling Vikir that he could do it as he turned around. Ayan was surprised to hear that from Vikir. She walks over to his side to question him if he really knew about a way to save Ahul. Vikir replies that he did, but he needed her to do something for him. Ayan was glad to hear that she could help, so she tells him to ask her for anything. "Bring me out of the deep forest," was Vikir's request to Ayan, who then wore a shocked expression on her face after she heard that. He looks at her with a serious look on his face, telling her that by doing that for him, Vikir would be able to get the medicine for the infection. "Don't say such things," shouted Ayan all of a sudden, which startles Ahun, who was outside the house doing what Vikir wanted him to do. Ayan proceeds to scold and lecture Vikir, stating that even though he was acknowledged as a member of the Balaks, there is a condition for going out into a foreign land and that there was no way her principled mother would allow that. Vikir simply replied that he agrees that the principled matriarch would most likely give up on Ahul, but he continues to tell her that if the people here keep it a secret, Vikir could sneak out and return without anyone knowing that he had left. "Will you let me go, Ayan?" said Vikir with his riz level going off the charts as he looked at her with his devious red eyes. But Ayan couldn't reply to him straight away. His riz powers had her stuttering as she gripped her body tightly. The scene changes to the deep forest being flooded with massive amounts of water, but something quick was bouncing off the logs that floated in the waters. Our boy Vikir is seen hopping with ease onto the various logs in the river, carrying something on his back as well, but then something was pulling his attention as he held a troubled expression. Vikir then comes to a screeching halt. He turns around to ask someone about why they were following him. "Didn't you let me go?" questioned Vikir, as it is revealed to be our waifu Ayan who was following him from the start. She tells him that they should go together, but Vikir replies that she would only get in his way. Ayan asks him to tell her where he was going, but Vikir replied with a stern no. She then questions him about why he was taking Pomerian. It turns out that it was our cutie pie Pomerian who was being carried by Vikir all along. She was still sleeping peacefully on his back as Vikir didn't reply to Ayan's answer. She talked to Vikir about how she saw him using a sword that came out from his arm and the fact that he knew about Red Death. All these things happened, yet Ayan didn't ask him about any of them. The rain continued to pour down heavily onto the pair as she recalled their memories together. Ayan knew from the first time that they met, from when he had rescued her from being a slave, that she would always give in to Vikir, and the fact that she couldn't ask him anything is that She knew that Vikir would disappear once he tells her the answer, so she just wanted Vikir to answer one thing. With a sad look on her face, Ayan asks him, "You'll come back, right?" Afraid of hearing the worst answer from Vikir made Ayan close her eyes. "I will," said Vikir, which made Ayan open her eyes just as she was about to cry, but as she looked up to see him, her face changes expressions. Vikir had disappeared from her sight, leaving her to mutter the words, "You better keep your promise." The scene changes to a mansion. Chihuahua could be seen touching his nose as he lets out a deep sigh. He noticed that it was getting dark already and that no matter how much paperwork he had done, the numbers don't seem to decrease. The moonlight then pours inside the room where he sat. He walks over to the window to gaze at the moonlit skies, thinking about how nice it was back when the deputy consul was here. The work may have been tiring, but it was fun. Chihuahua still couldn't believe the fact that the deputy consul was dead as he watches over the city. "I miss him," said Chihuahua with a saddened expression on his face as he gazes up to the moon. "Did you call me?" asked Vikir as he appeared right in front of Chihuahua's face the same way Spider-Man did to Mary Jane in the first ever Spider-Man movie. Comment below if any of you could hang yourself upside down by just grabbing onto the window like Vikir is doing while holding Pomerian with his other arm. Chihuahua could only stare at the sudden appearance of Vikir with a shocked look on his face. But a sudden flurry of emotions combined with shock and fear overtook Chihuahua as his mind tried to process what was going on right now. Vikir finally lands down from his hanging position. In his Spider-Man pose, he looks at Chihuahua with a smile on his face while Pomerian continued to sleep peacefully on his back. "How are you, Secretary General Chihuahua?" Vikir asks him. Chihuahua had finally calmed down after seeing the so-called dead Vikir alive right in front of him now. He then recalls the events that Vikir had explained to him, from Vikir confronting a monster from the deep forest, having received a critical injury and having to stay with the barbarians. As he sips his tea, Vikir agrees with what Chihuahua had summarized while Pomerian continued to sleep by his side peacefully. But Chihuahua continues to question Vikir about whether he was saying not an actually ghost. Vikir could only smile and wonder if that was why Chihuahua was shocked for so long. He then tells Secretary General Chihuahua that he was still the same as ever. Tears flooded from his eyes upon hearing those words from our boy Vikir. His body trembled as he tried his best to contain his feelings while telling Vikir that he was so glad that he was still alive. But he soon questions Vikir about who the child was that was beside him as she resembles Vikir. Chihuahua further asks if she was the child that he had with the barbarians. Vikir replies that he and Pomerian simply shared the same bloodline, which was why they looked similar and that it was not what he was thinking about. But Chihuahua continued to become more curious after hearing that Vikir and Pomerian shared the same bloodline and that he had mentioned that it was not what he was thinking about right now as he continues to wipe the tears off his face. Vikir then asks Chihuahua about whether he could look after the child beside him. This was when Vikir introduces and reveals that this child was called Pomerian. He noted that it would be good for him to go through basic education with her. Chihuahua immediately agrees to Vikir's request, noting that it had been a while since he had gotten an order from him, so he wanted Vikir to leave it to him. Vikir then notices a pile of books and papers that covered and sat on top of Chihuahua's desk. This prompts him to ask about whether it was difficult for him to take on the work for Underdog City by himself as the Secretary General. Vikir then offers a solution by telling Chihuahua to look for Cindy Wendyson Mesamadunaro if he ever needed help. Hearing that name made Chihuahua recall the image of Cindy as he questions Vikir if she was the same criminal that he had released 2 years ago during the plea deal. But he was more curious about how to find her. Vikir asks him if he remembers the time when he was in office and had given 10 billion gold to a certain girl. Chihuahua remembers the girl as Judy who sold flowers. Vikir reveals that no one was supporting Judy, which made approaching her easy, so Cindy would have went with that child. He added on that if Cindy doesn't cooperate he could tell her that Vikir was still alive, and since she was indebted to him, she would be willing to help. Chihuahua replies that he understood and was happy to find a solution with his workload. As the sun started to rise in the background, Chihuahua then asks Vikir about when he would be returning. Vikir smiles and continues to drink from his cup, telling Chihuahua that he would return once he had finished what he needed to do. Recalling the moment he had left Ayan behind in the deep forest, Vikir knew that he had to return as he had a promise to fulfill as well. Treating a Hule's Red Death can be done quickly with a single drop of holy water from that clan. Knowing that information made Vikir decide on what he needed to do as he looked out from the window while Pomerian and Chihuahua got closer to one another in the background. Gazing up into the skies, Vikir knew that he had to go to the religious and holy Quo Vadis clan. The scene changes to a new location we have never seen before. 2 guards wearing silver armor stood together as they held their spears in an ancient city. One of them soon notices something that was approaching their city. Seeing the incoming object made they crossed their spears to block its path. It turns out to be a carriage that was being led by a horse. The guards announced to the driver that they would be carrying out an inspection. One of the guards recognizes the driver as Sir Joseph, who is the one that manages the oil shop on the first floor. They soon question him about what he had brought with him this time. Joseph smiles and reveals a letter in his hand informing the guards that he had brought oil as it was written on his import permit. One of the guards steps forward and asks him if he could check what was inside. Joseph chuckles nervously while telling the guard that he had come here really often and wonders if there really was a need to check it, but the guard refuses his request by telling him that the higher-ups take importance in formalities. Seeing his request denied started to cause Joseph to sweat a bit. The guard continued to look amongst the various barrels of oil that were on the carriage, thinking about which one of them he should open. He finally picks up a single oil barrel and noted that this one looks good. Panic and fear started to set inside Joseph as he couldn't believe that the guard had chosen the single barrel that was the most important to him. The guard soon opens the lid off the oil barrel, looking inside of it with an intense gaze. He then commented out that it was fine as it was revealed that the oil barrel contained nothing else but oil inside it. The guard walks past Joseph and informs him that he can pass. Joseph lets out a sigh of relief after seeing that nothing had happened. The guards then welcomed him to St. Mecca. The carriage that Joseph drove soon reached the end of an alleyway inside the city. "You can come out now," said Joseph as he looked back at the oil barrels with a nervous aura surrounding him, but the oil barrels simply remained silent for a moment, before a handprint appeared from within one of the oil barrels with tremendous strength. Joseph watched in horror as the sounds of the oil barrel lid echoed through the air as it continued to be hammered by the hand. A figure soon emerges from inside the oil barrel covered in the oil, wearing a costume as if he was a plague doctor from Assassin's Creed. The figure soon walks out from the oil barrel. Joseph approaches the figure and nervously asks that since he had fulfilled his promise of getting the figure inside St. Mecca, then it meant that he could go now. But the figure tells Joseph to wait, which startles him. The figure hands over a pouch to Joseph, telling him that it was the ox-bear canine which was promised to him. Joseph nervously accepts the reward and thanks the figure for it. He stood still as he watched the figure walk away. Joseph couldn't believe that the figure had been submerged inside the oil barrel for over 2 hours, making him question if that mysterious figure was even human at all, as that same figure stood on top of the bell tower, giving off major Assassin's Creed vibes. The mysterious figure soon removes the mask and lets out a deep breath. It was revealed to be Vikir. He watches over St. Mecca while stating that it was his first time being submerged for so long since the river Styx, where he was submerged for 7 minutes. But anyways, he was glad to have successfully infiltrated the Quo Vadis territory. St. Mecca was the Quo Vadis clan's central city. It has a population of 160,000 people. Because of the church, sexual desires and greed are heavily restricted. Even if gold is on the floor, they would walk past it. Since the citizens are consciously aware of order and public peace, they strictly abide by the rules. The bell in St. Mecca soon begun to rung heavily. Vikir looks up at it and started to think about how when the clock tower's bell rings, the people of St. Mecca would do this weird thing where they stop walking and pray. Just like Vikir thought, the people of St. Mecca soon stood still and held their hands together in a prayer position. A familiar headdress soon appears amongst the citizens of the city. Vikir calmly and easily walks past all the citizens with ease, thinking about how they could live when it's so suffocating here. Night soon arrives as darkness covers the streets of the city, only to be lighted by lamps. Vikir stood in front of a water well while rummaging through his jacket. He reveals a vial that contained a purple liquid inside of it and opens the cap. He then begins to pour out the mysterious purple liquid inside the vial. The red death's infectious bacteria is carried in a hule's blood, sweat and tears. It's a highly infectious plague, so people will get infected immediately pouring this into the well. Although it's an extreme method, the situation is very urgent, and every minute and second is precious. It's a religious and holy territory, so they'll be rescued before a casualty even comes. "Hey, who are you?" questioned a bunch of kids that appeared from behind Vikir out of the blue. The kid talked about how there was a suspicious person by the well, but his friend tells him that they should just go, as looking at Vikir made them realize that he looks dangerous. Vikir lets out his bloodhound Riz aura, which envelopes the entire area around him in a red murderous color. He calls out to the children and tells them to listen carefully. He warns them that this well was cursed, and that those who drink the water from this well will not be spared by death. "Heed my words well," warned Vikir. The kids immediately tried to get the F out of there as they screamed out in horror. They shouted out that there was a ghost and that the ghost had placed a curse on the well. Another kid began to cry as he shouts that he would never drink from that well. As the ball that the kids dropped rolled over to Vikir, He was glad that with this, the children wouldn't drink from the well. Such a nice guy. A dagger soon appears and stabs itself deep into the ground. Vikir had placed the dagger near the water well, noting that a dagger left by the Leviathan clan, a clan famous for its deadly poisons, and that judging from the situation, the ones who spread the Red Death in the deep forest were none other than the Leviathan clan. Vikir smiles deviously over his mastermind plan, knowing that since the religiously holy clan and the deadly poison clan hadn't had a good relationship since long before, he knew that a huge fight will probably break out with his actions, and that it was all for his preparations. Vikir soon realizes that it was almost time the holy water pours, making him wonder if he should go see the Saintess Dollars. A blonde-haired woman sat on a chair and watches the citizens gather before her. Is this a new waifu for our boy? Comment below what you think. Thanks for watching the latest part from the voice of Manhwa. Subscribe for more content and don't forget to comment below what you want to see in the future. Like and share for more.